yield that.
Gentlemen, Mr. Pfluger for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My deepest sympathies to the family of Sheila Jackson Lee. We worked very closely together on many things, and she was an excellent member of this committee. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Carter, when he talked about Americans deserve the truth. I absolutely agree with that, and also Mr. Magaziner talking about Republicans and Democrats working together on the oversight. I'd imagine if we worked together, the transparency that we could have on so many other issues that are going on right now, and I believe that that is possible for us to do. Thank you both for being here. Colonel Paris, was it clear to you, when we're talking about rules of engagement, deconfliction plans, the assignments of which law enforcement agency will cover which section, did you have concerns prior to the president coming on stage? And if so, did you voice those concerns to the Secret Service?
So just to be clear, I was not present at the venue on July 13th.
But in the planning and the lead-up,
my default position would be that our commanders are aware of what their responsibilities are within a unified command structure reporting to the Secret Service.
And do you believe that it was absolutely clear that there were zero questions of who was supposed, what areas of the venue?
I can only comment to our responsibilities, and I believe our responsibilities were delineated to us, and I believe we met or exceeded those responsibilities based on everything that I know as I sit here 10 days in.
I think there's still a lot of questions regarding the plan, you know.
Agreed.
And this is always, in any sort of protection assignment, that's always the hardest thing. Who are friendly assets? Who could be a vulnerable hostile actor? Who displays hostile intent, hostile act? I think it's clear there was a failure, and we definitely want to get to the bottom of it. President Yos, do you get the impression that Secret Service, at any point in the run-up to this or other events, has been stretched thin when it comes to their work hours that they are putting in, the resources that they have? Was that communicated in any way?
Well, I can't speak directly to that. I can tell you that law enforcement across this country is stretched thin. Just simply.
This next question, there's a piece of legislation, H.R. 8081, called the Disgraced Act. It says denying infinite security and government resources allocated towards convicted, dishonorable former protectees act, which is a whole mouthful of basic details away from people that could include those who are convicted. The impact if former President Trump didn't have a protective detail of U.S. Secret Service there. Talk to me about the impact on state and local partners to protect them in any of the communities that you represent. And by the way, he also was responsible for taking out al-Baghdadi, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, and Qasem Soleimani and the Iranian government to do harm to him and other people like him if you don't have Secret Service help.
Than happy to you. So I think, we're trying to become very political in this. I think we have a president of the United States who has, by simple virtue of his position, having served as president, there's a certain protection because of his service to the country. So the rest of these things are all things that are for me to decide, other than to tell you that I think we have a responsibility to.
This is not political. That's not political. He deserves protection. You're absolutely right. I agree. Colonel Paris?
I would just echo that my understanding is it's a federal statute that creates the Secret Service and tasks them with those responsibilities. So to contemplate a different paradigm, I would reflect back to the legislation.
If he was denied a protective detail in Pennsylvania this past week, the weekend prior, what would that have done to your local resource to protect him adequately?
I think the removal of any resource inherently makes the burden on the surrounding resources that would somewhat additional.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. Point of order.
Point of order.
Gentleman's recognized.
So, appreciate the gentleman's questions, but let me put it another way to the witnesses. The reference legislation.
Mr. Member, I mean, a question to the witness would be someone yielding to you. A point of order. I'm allowing you.
Thank you. Well, the point of order is if you read the bill, it says that if you are a convicted felon and found and sentenced by a judge, then you would not be, that's my point of order, that you would not have service. You have to be a convicted felon and sentenced. Now, nobody who was a protectee was a convicted felon. But if those who are lawyers here know that once you are a convicted felon and sentenced, you are remanded the custody of that particular law enforcement agency for custody. I think anomaly to try to say that the Secret Service would have to protect a felon in jail, a convicted felon. So the whole notion about my legislation, I just say to the gentleman, if you read it, it says you have to be a convicted felon and sentenced. Now, we're not there. The conjecture, you can do whatever you want. But let me be clear about the bill. Republicans have made a lot of hate about the bill, saying it's about former President Trump and will take away his security. That just is not true. The bill doesn't mention former Trump, President Trump, and it would not have affected security at this tragic event. The bill talks about any Secret Service protectee who is convicted of a felony and sentenced to serve jail time. And it does not take away security. The bill makes clear that when a protectee is sentenced and remanded to the custody of prison officials, the Secret Service is able to hand off the prisoner in an orderly fashion, and that Secret Service agents aren't forced to become correctional officers too. That's the legislation. That's all it says. For the record, we can go back to...
The gentleman will need to get to his point of order. And,
well, point of order is the line of question is inconsistent with the legislation. And it does not say on that day former President Trump would have been without Secret Service protection. He is not sentenced. If he's not sentenced, he will still have the protection. Plain and simple.
So you yield on your point of order, Mr. Ranking Member? You did. Okay. I want to make a point. Rates the attitude in our society, and so I just make that point of order about this particular legislation. I made in my opening remarks a request that he would draw the bill. But,
I just wanted to make it as clear that this bill was filed well in advance. So it's important to mention timing, that it wasn't.
Well, we don't want to debate the bill. We're here to hear from witnesses, so I'm going to go ahead and end this now, and we're going to move on. And I think actually Mr. Ivey is up for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I want to associate myself with the remarks of our members here with respect to the loss of Ms. Jackson Lee. It's with deep sadness that I feel her loss. I share not only this committee with on the Judiciary Committee as well, and she was insightful and inspirational in the way she handled herself and her role here in Congress. I also want to join with the comments about sympathies to the comparator family and the individuals who were injured on the day of the shooting. And I want to thank the chair for taking us up to Butler yesterday. My only regret about it was that it was too quick. And I think that, and I didn't know it was going to be like that, frankly, until after we got there and had a chance to talk to people in the community. But when we got there, they were very anxious to talk to us. In particular, I had conversations with Angela Flieger, supervisor for, and I hope I don't butcher too bad, Connequenessing Township, who was extremely helpful, and Sam Zerzolo, who was a commissioner from Butler Township. And they were able to provide information on several fronts that I think we need to pay attention to, not just for this particular event, but going forward. Could you hit a video for me there? I think Ms. Flieger tried to produce this and send it to me. The red building is the one that was directly behind the stage. The building in the center there was where the shooter was. The reason I'm asking for this to be shown is that as you get past the middle of it and look to the opposite side of the field from where the shots came, oh, you can stop it now. I counted about 12 rooftops there, just sort of standing at the front. I'm a former federal prosecutor. I don't have a background in protection, but my thought was, why would we pick a spot where you had many rooftops that were available? And my colleague, Mr. Crane, I definitely defer to your experience as a sniper in the military, and your point about picking the water tower as a higher would have been a good one, I think, to consider. And I'm curious about finding out what the Secret Service would say about that. But I just thought that this was a bad site to pick where you put them. There was just openings. The field was totally open. And one of the things that Ms. Flieger pointed out was that the road that went to the side of this spot here, the stage was right in front of those two buildings. The snipers were on top of those, I believe. They didn't shut down that road. And she also showed me a photo of her husband going in on that day through a fence that wasn't guarded in the perimeter area. Another point that she made was that the night before the speech was done, she and 50 or 60 other people from the community came to decorate the stage and put up the red, white, and blue blending and the Trump signs and everything. But the point she had there was that none of those people were vetted before they went into the area and were up at the stage and, could have done anything, I think was the point that she made. And also noted that apparently the shooter had hidden the gun somewhere on the site by, I think, where the, I hate to call the name of the business, but the business where the shooter ended up taking the shots from. So I think there's a variety of concerns here that I look forward to hear from these individuals. I don't know if it's going to be in the context of this committee or the oversight committee or the task force that's been proposed. Whoever does it needs to go talk to these folks, because the ones that I talked with had not been interviewed by the FBI, Secret Service, or local police. And they have key information that I think we should have, especially in making decisions about going forward. And then just a couple points before my time runs out. I think it came up with respect to the communications, because I appreciate Mr. Yoi's comments there, but we need to figure out not just what happened on that day, but when we do these at other sites across the country going forward, what's going to, it's critical to make sure that we go forward with the investigation of the Secret Service, whether she's there or not. And then the last point, I apologize for running over, is that to the Secret Service and to Homeland Security, I know there's going to be a process now to replace her, but that cannot get in the way of us sorting out what happened on the day, and more importantly, what we need to take forward, because we've got other events coming up in the near future. We got to make sure we take those lessons quickly, and so we can move them forward. And I thank the chair for his deference for giving me a little time to run over there, and it's up to Butler.
You were making an excellent point, and I didn't want to stop you, Mr. Ivey. I now recognize Mr. Garbarino, the gentleman from New York, for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Colonel Paris, there have been conflicting reports about the location of state and local law enforcement. Secret Service Director, I believe, said that former Secret Service Director said that local police were in the same building that the gunman fired from, while other accounts indicate that local law enforcement was in an adjacent building. Were any Pennsylvania state troopers, state police assigned to the building where the shooting happened?
There were no state troopers, to my knowledge, assigned there, sir.
Do you know if any other local law enforcement were assigned inside that building?
I only know that Butler ESU were assigned. When you say that building, I'm referring to there's a series of buildings there that have covered walkways or second-story walkways that allow you to, it's almost like a pole barn type configuration, a modular type building. But to my knowledge, there were no troopers assigned to that location, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Yos, as technology has evolved, drones have become widely available to both law enforcement and the public. For a large event with this level of security, would you normally expect to use drones for surveillance and deploy drone technology?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the last part.
Would you normally expect law enforcement to use drones for surveillance and deploy counter-drone technology?
Well, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I just in my experience at this location is there are a number of elevated locations that should have been secured. There are a lot of ways to secure that. They could be with individuals assigned to it, but certainly an overwatch to be able to get visual of those locations is paramount.
It's been reported that the Secret Service apparently did not use drones for surveillance, but the shooter was able to fly his own drone in the area earlier on the day of the rally and get aerial footage of the site. Do you know it's true?
I have no direct knowledge.
Were you okay? So, and you know if whether or not local, state Secret Service was aware of any drone use?
I've heard the news report. I have no direct knowledge.
Would you consider this a major security breach?
Absolutely.
Now, it's also been reported, Colonel Paris, that the local law enforcement spotted the shooter outside the AGR building and on its roof minutes prior to shooting. Did local police alert the Secret Service that the gunman was on or around the AGR building roof? Do you know?
So this goes to earlier qualifier about the timeline, but my understanding of the sequence of events is that he was determined to be suspicious as a result of behavior that he was exhibiting around that area in front of the AGR building. There was a text thread that was going, I've been briefed, between the ESU members. They identified, they took a photo of him. At some point when he utilized the rangefinder, the suspicion was heightened. So I know at a certain point in the command post, a member of PSP received a phone call and a text message from members of ESU, and I know from an interview that was immediately relayed in the command post to the Secret Service.
And what happened? Yeah. So that was my next question. So what happened, what actions were taken after it was relayed to Secret Service?
So when the PSP member received that information and verbally turned right around, gave it to the Secret Service, our member was provided with a number to which the picture that had been taken by the Butler ESU members, or that was on that group thread, to which that should be sent. Our member did that, and our understanding was that was some element of the Secret Service.
So this was all reported. Yeah, this was all reported to Secret Service, and they gave him Secret Service, then sent him back one of your officers a number back to send the information back to. Is that what you just said?
That's my understanding.
When did that happen?
Again, the actual timeline, I'm very remiss because I know these timelines need to be hammered out exactly to the minute, but I would say, that the overall timeline is about an hour before is when he became suspicious to ESU. What I want to say is, if we know that former President Trump was shot at 11 hours, it was probably in the vicinity of 25 30 minutes, but I want
before he went on to speak.
But at that point, he was determined to be suspicious. There was no information that he possessed a weapon. He was outside of that.
Design, develop, scale, repeat. Wick Studio, the plum for 8 season enterprises.
Here's the thing, aging begins in your cells. Start supporting your cell health today.
To locate him as people were moving across that space who were attending the event to the secure perimeter.
Was he the only one determined to be suspicious that day?
The gentleman needs to wrap it up, and perhaps somebody else will yield to you or me
I yield back
on this topic. I recognize Mr. Goldman now for 5 minutes.
Or we'll just pick up the question here.
That sounds great, Scooter.
First, I do want to mention how sad it is to see Sheila Jackson Lee's empty seat there. What an incredible inspiration to so many of us, and a member, an advocate, community presence. Are sorry to miss her. She would be very eager to be asking questions here today, because there are a lot of unanswered questions, and I sat through a 4.5-hour hearing yesterday with the director of the Secret Service, and we got no information. So I'm going to jump on, piggyback off of Mr. Garbarino. Where you left off is that you relayed, or PSP relayed, the photograph, the number that the Secret Service directed your officer to. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Now, did anything come back? Any instructions or directions come back from the Secret Service?
So again, that is left to the after action. We're trying to come up with a sequence of events that led to Crooks on top of the building where he ultimately took shots. So
right, but you said, I'm trying to find just, I don't need the specific timeline. I'm trying to just figure out the sequence, because you said that many of your officers, or Butler ESU officers, were looking for Crooks. That was after that photograph was relayed to the Secret Service?
My understanding was after the photo was relayed to the our trooper in the camp post, and yes, Crooks was in that area around the building. My understanding is 2 additional municipal officers who were on a different post responded to that area, and they began actively looking for Crooks. They circumvented, or they circumscribed a building to try and locate him, it became at some point that he was up on the roof. Those two municipal officers who responded then, to their credit, actively, once they realized that he was on the roof, one boosted the other one up, hanging from the ledge of the roof. By the time that officer was boosted up on top of the roof, Crooks was on it, almost in that final position that you saw. He had the AR out, and he pointed it at the municipal officer who, suspended from the roof, was not in a position, feet dangling at that point, to draw a weapon or continue hoisting himself back up on the roof. He drops back down from the roof, and at this point, I believe that's when the video that's been widely circulated with people filming Crooks up on the roof, saying there's somebody up on the roof. There were other law enforcement around the building running, but their vantage point on the ground did not lend a clear line of sight to where Crooks was at the top of that building. One of our troopers on roving patrol also was notified. That word went out, and he responded about the time that the municipal officer was boosting the other officer up onto the roof.
What was he notified of?
I don't know specifically. That's going to be part of the after action. But we obviously knew that he was Crooks was suspicious. He had not gone into the venue, and they were actively doing everything they could to try and locate him.
So the local officer outside of the perimeter in charge of securing the area, one way or another, understood or got direction that they needed to try to find Crooks, presumably to ask him questions, interview him. Is that what the protocol is?
Clear about. I don't want to speak for the. I haven't seen the Secret Service operations plan, what their responsibilities were, and what their understanding were. I don't want to comment on
how they got the message.
Somehow there was
knew.
information that he was suspicious. By the time that municipal officer was hoisted up onto the roof and saw him, he had the weapon out.
Do you know how long it was between the time that the photograph was relayed to the Secret Service and the time when the officer was trying to hoist the roof?
So that's a critical,
yes,
detailed, salient question. I would answer it from reverse time period, from if the first shots rang out at 18:11 hours. The hoisting up of the officer occurred probably no more. Again, I'm going to give you a time, but I want to just put it.
We understand.
Of
Not
a
specific.
sequence at what they were notified in the interim still remains under investigation.
Right. And when he fell off of he let go?
The municipal officer, when the briefing that I had was the municipal officer saw Crooks, Crooks saw him, Crooks turned and leveled the gun at him in a position tactically of extreme disadvantage, suspended, in the air with your legs dangling after somebody had boosted you up.
And he let go, right?
He fell back down.
And was there at that point any communications that there's a shooter on the roof from the municipal officers who were there?
Point, that's all part of the after action. We're just trying to get a sequence of events up to the point when Crooks then fired the weapon. So that's been the focus of our investigation.
But there was at least, you said you thought 2.5 to 3 minutes between the time when the municipal officers tried to hoist on top of the roof, Crooks pointed the gun at them, they dropped, and then between that time and when he fired the shots.
I don't want to give an exact period of time, but it was minutes. It was a very period of time. And for his ability.
But not seconds.
I would say minutes. But I would be remiss if I gave you, and I want to be very on the record, do an investigation like this, the timeline is critical. You're asking me, I was briefed, I'm answering to the best of my ability right now.
And I know my time is up. Colonel Paris, I want to thank you for, providing us this information. It was incredibly disappointing that the director of the Secret Service did nothing diligently to try to get witnesses here. This is not an academic exercise. This is not something that the American people can wait 60 days for. Gaps in information, there are conspiracy theories, there is, and all of our safety is at risk, political violence is escalated, and we need to know these answers. I thank you for bringing these witnesses here. And
Absolutely. And I appreciate the tag team between two sides to get to the details on this, because this is poignant, very poignant. I now recognize Ms. Green for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Colonel Paris, I'd like to carry the dialogue on about the specific timeline. I have a timeline that was given to us on the Oversight Committee yesterday when we questioned former Secret Service Director Cheadle. The line that I'd like is exactly what you were just discussing here. 18 minutes before President Trump took the stage, it was at 5:45 that the Butler County Emergency Services noticed Thomas Crooks on the roof, took a picture and reported it. You stated just a few minutes before your testimony that that police or PSP were given a phone number to the Secret Service, and that Butler County Emergency Services texted or sent the picture. Was that a text? Was that a digital platform? Was it an email? How did they send the picture?
So just to be clear, at that period of time, at 1845, I don't believe the testimony was
5:45 p.m.
17:45 p.m. Yes, ma'am. He was not up on the roof at that point, is my belief.
No. Emergency Services noticed Thomas Crooks on the roof. This is the timeline that we have. Took a picture, reported it. Who did they send that picture to? Just
to be clear, they were posted in the building and took a picture of him. That's what you're.
Yes. Who did they send? All of took place. This was 18 minutes before President Trump actually took the stage at p.m. President Trump was shot in the face at 6:11 p.m. This has all been reported these times. Why do you not have a timeline?
It's not the timeline is going for the after report. Obviously, we're conducting an investigation with the FBI, deferential to the FBI in terms of what has been released to the media. One press brief of Saturday night, July 13th, and we've been on that. Refer you to the timelines that you're quoting. I just knowledge and belief. I don't have a minute by minute. Multiple briefings about have gleaned, but they're from the perspective of PSP investigating attempted homicide.
Thank you, Colonel. During the event today was from you that there was a suspicious person.
So based on my knowledge and belief of the command post from Butler ESU, in terms of Crooks, was the first time that I'm aware of. Again, keeping in mind, I've heard estimates that there were some people there. There were multiple people identified as suspicious that were identified in that area.
Yes, thank you. Now, you said before in your questions that you haven't seen, but didn't your team participate in a plan?
As my answer prior, I've asked for it. The state police has asked for it. We have yet to receive it. Understanding is that our walkthrough with our commanders and our area commander was to delineate what our responsibilities were to fulfill those responsibilities.
Who was the secret agent in charge of the advance team?
I don't know the name of the agent.
How was PA communicate with Secret Service on the advance team?
You mean leading in the planning leading? So my understanding is, as is notified, we were notified by email on July 5th. The meeting on July Monday was to get all of those partners together